signed in and get a handout or two there. There is a copy of our hurricane manual there. We're not going to go through that whole manual today. We have done that with the shelter schools themselves, but that's the whole manual. Today's course on shelters is just going to be a short course. We call it the crash course. But we also have a fire and life safety course that's going to be done, so we're going to have like a 15-minute break in between. We have several presenters that are here today. Chris Glenn, Christine Peugeot from our HR department is here. Lisa Kern is here from Student Support Programs. Did I get that right? Scott Moles is here from our maintenance department. And then Ray Timer and Tom Rutledge are here, our safety inspectors. They're going to do the fire safety portion of that. Get that. So we're going to start with the hurricane shelter operations. Like I said, this is the short course. This is a makeup for the Together We Lead course that we did. And like I said, we did a July workshop with all the shelter schools for a full day. So this is just general for all administrators, just a quick overview, some of the basics. And we're going to talk about some of the things that have changed this year. And there's been lots of changes since our storm last year, mostly in staffing, registration, medical help, and dealing with pets. So we're going to get into all that. Just curious, how many of you actually worked in a shelter for Irma? Most of you. So you know all the lessons that were learned. There were a lot of lessons that were learned. One of the biggest things that we've made changes in is actually staffing. So we're going to hear about some of that first. Staffing and registration, some big changes in that. Dealing with pets, I mean, our plan for opening shelters with pets was only to use high schools because they had the room, and we had animal control from the county was going to come in and help us with that. But we had so many pets that we ended up taking pets at all shelters. So we're going to talk a lot about how we're going to deal with that next time. We'd still like to limit the amount of pets to just high schools, but we know the way things are, we'll probably end up with pets everywhere, so we're going to have a plan that would include dealing with pets at all schools. Some of the really good changes in security and medical help. We're going to have a lot more deputies at our schools, and we're going to have EMTs. So fire rescue is actually going to station EMTs at the shelters also. And first up, we're going to talk about staffing. I got to give this to you.
Oh,
I know.
Wear this. Okay. Okay, now I'm official. All right, I won't walk away. I won't break it. I'll try not to. So, hello everyone. My name is Christine Peugeot. I have had the pleasure of meeting many of you, but not all of you. I am the director of HR for the school district, and I get to talk with you today about some exciting changes. I don't know how exciting, but some changes that we're making in terms of staffing shelters during emergency operations. So let me get to that slide. We have a new strategic approach where, if you think about it, for the last several years, and probably as long as anybody can remember, we have relied upon a relatively small group of administrators to provide the bulk of the support in terms of staffing. So this year we decided to take and leverage our large workforce. We have around 10,000 employees, and see what we could do with that. Because, you know, especially when we announced that we were providing compensation for some of those services, you know, we started to have employees say, well, what about me? You know, and I'd be interested in this. And even people who weren't necessarily interested in just the compensation, they just wanted to help. So we had staff that were showing up who were not administrators, who were perfectly capable of being able to provide the services, yet we didn't really have a plan in place to take full advantage of that. So this year, that's what we're doing. It does not mean that we're not still maintaining those administrator assignments. So we have assigned all administrators to a particular shelter school in the event it becomes necessary that we have to call on people because we're not able to staff fully with the people who have volunteered. So we have admins who also volunteered, but what we're trying to do is really take those people first that said, yes, I want to be here. Yes, I'm able to be here. This is what I'm interested in doing, as opposed to compelling people who may not be comfortable in those types of situations. And if we can do it without them, then we'll do it without them. But at the end of the day, those of us who are administrators, it's in our contracts. We are expected to report if called. We're just taking a little bit different approach. And what that means is we are working with about 1,800 people this time around. So that's great. We had a pretty good response rate to the first initial request that went out through our new record system on Talent Ed. So these are the folks that responded and said, yes, I am interested in working at a shelter for compensation. So what else have we done? So we're really forming a stronger alliance with several of our county partners and our first responders, as John mentioned. What this means is Pasco County itself has offered up around 130 people who are able to assist with clerical and administrative type functions. If you think about it, a lot of what happens at the shelter, especially early on, is registration. So Chris is going to talk with you a little bit later about how we're going to, I always use the word electronify, I don't even know if it's a real word, but that's what we're doing with registration this year, so it's easier to keep track of. But we need people who are able to have the skills to be able to quickly process people and get them through, because that's where you're going to see the bottleneck, all the people coming in at the beginning. So we're using their 130 plus people to work around that registration piece, and when you'll learn more about the tiers later, but tier 1 are those first schools that are going to open up in the event of an emergency, and we need to send most of our support there. We also have an increased number of sheriff and fire rescue to make sure that we have 24/7 coverage. And all of this is going to be noted on a combined workforce matrix. This may not be something that you all necessarily see, but it's going on behind the scenes to ensure that we have the appropriate ratios of medical and security coverage in place. So last year we had some feedback where there might be a small school that had 300 or 400 residents that had the same amount of law enforcement presence as a school that had 2,200 occupants. So there was a big difference there was a big disparity, and we want to make sure that we better address that so we can really focus on those levels and target the support where we need it the most. So again, that's just to ensure adequate coverage, and we're also working in HREQ to pre-assign to the extent possible, and we call it working in waves, because we never know. We first started talking about shift work. The first shift would be from this time to this time. But in reality, we don't really know when the storm is going to come through. First shift might be starting at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we're talking about waves of people. So we have our first wave of people lined up, and we're going to have that lined up in advance so that we communicate with those people ahead of time, let them know what school they're going to be expected to go to when called, and we're utilizing our School Connect, School Messenger, I hope I got that right, whichever one it is that we're used to communicating with on now. So employees will get like a text message, email, phone message, and we're setting up different communication pieces in that system to be able to make that work. So how is this all happening? HREQ now is going to be primarily the single point of contact for all of the staffing needs at the schools. There are some exceptions to that. For example, food and nutrition services, Julie does a really good job with managing her team and her specialists, and they get the folks where they need to get them. So we're not going to fix what's not broken. So she's going to continue to do that with her team. However, all of the other aspects of that general support, dormitory support, getting people to where they are in the shelters, registration, general cleanup, which custodial would come into play, is all going to come through HR. So say you're a school principal and you realize right away that some of your people didn't show up, or you need more help with that general assistance, then you would contact HR. There's going to be a number that's published. We have about 4 to 5 administrators, 6, working in our department to make sure that we handle those requests, and then we dispatch people accordingly. We're also working with Mark Fox's group in maintenance so that if we have a specific need for particular types of maintenance issues or custodial, we will be directly in contact with the area specialists who will help us get that support out to the schools. But this will hopefully streamline who you all will need to contact in the event of a staffing crisis or a shortage, and then we're going to turn around and share that information with the EOC instead of having anybody communicate directly with the EOC. So what we're really asking schools to do to help out this process and to make sure that there's enough support is to think about the community partnerships that already exist. We talked about elementary schools who might have existing relationships with pediatricians' offices who have their children at the school. So that's a great resource because they have people who are specifically trained in the medical field who could provide extra assistance in a volunteer capacity. Same thing with restaurant owners, people who have already communicated that they want to help. So think about those people and try to make those connections now so that when the time comes, they'll know and they'll expect the call. The reason why we're asking the schools to do that is because it's much more meaningful for somebody who has already created and cultivated that relationship with the person to make that phone call as opposed to me or someone else in HR. Like, who is this lady? You know, sure, we'll help. But I think it's going to have a lot more impact if it's coming from that school administration. Let's see here. So just some takeaways. We'll try to keep this brief. The available pool is much larger now. So we're not dealing with around 300 people. We're expanding that out to make maximum use of the staff that we have. We are the single point of contact in HR for your staffing needs, and more information will go out about that when the time comes. Schools, again, tapping into your local resources and moving in. It's a nice segue into the registration piece. Staff will be signing in electronically because it's important that we keep track of those records for the purpose of being reimbursed by FEMA so that we can pay all of these employees. We didn't have this magic pot of money appear from the legislature, that's for sure. So we get reimbursed for all of that. So it's very important that we keep accurate records. So we will be going to an electronic format for that as we are with registration. So I'll hand it over to Chris. There you go.
All right. Well, I am Chris Glenn. I do work in HR. I'm the lead developer of, did I just start that over? Of the electronic system we'll be using for shelters this year. It will be based in FileMaker Pro. And, all right. So employees will clock in and out. Very simple. You're going to log in using your credentials to identify yourself as an employee. You just clock in and out. There is some scripts in there. If you miss a clock out, you will be able to punch in manually your missed punch so that we have a good time record. It'll also require you to put your duty in, like what you performed. If you're a shelter manager, obviously that's easy, but for people that do registration or dormitory management, they would just need to key that in, and that way we have the data needed to submit that to FEMA. If the school network is down, the internet is down, basically FileMaker is down, you will still use the paper forms like always. That is the backup plan, but we prefer to get it electronic. So I believe most of this is already done, or there's in the works a process that can be done very quickly. But FileMaker databases are being set up at the shelter schools. I believe that piece is already done. And then as far as getting FileMaker and the correct program, shortcuts and everything like that, that's going to be pushed out by Tech Help, which they can do at any time. So they're kind of waiting right now as this program's in beta and still getting changed a lot. They haven't pushed out the program yet, but they can do that quickly. So we'll get into registration. Registration used to be you come in, we do it all on paper. We're going to move that to electronic means. And what that means is they can create an account anywhere. It's online, so they don't have to be at the shelter to at least give us their information, who's coming, their family members, their pets, things like that. They won't be able to select their shelter from there. That will be done when they actually show up at a shelter. That's when you'll sign them in to that shelter. But hopefully that'll quicken the process. It gives you the ability, they can do it on their mobile phone, they can do it on an iPad, they can do it on a computer. So basically anything connected to the internet, they should be able to at least go in and start putting in their information, which should help. And then, like I said, they'll actually check in and out at the shelter. So you can do either one. They will register with the email address, preferably. If they don't have that, it's a combination of their first name, last name, and the phone number that they use. So those are the two ways they'll log in. You can search for them by their name, their number. Lots of different ways you can search for them to pull them up to actually check them into the shelter. The plan is for this database to be synced. So in the event that the internet goes out and our main server here is unreachable, that as long as you have power on at the school, you would be able to hit like a local copy, and then those will sync the databases up. We don't see a whole lot of need for this because I think most of the information that's going to go in this database is going to be before the storm hits, before we would have power outages, things like that. So Our hope is that most of it will just all end up on the external server and you won't need to sync it back and forth. But that is still being worked out. And again, just like timesheets, if it's not available, then you got to go back to paper registration. So you'll need to get those things printed out, in advance and just have them set aside in case you would need them. Somebody shouldn't have handed me this remote.
Okay.
So kind of back to the employee side, they're going to check in with their employee ID number. If you don't know that, hopefully you'll have a username. Either one of those will work. You would just put that in, and then the last 4 of your social is going to be the PIN number. There is the ability for a shelter manager to add employees to that list. So if they're not already in there for some reason, you can manually enter someone so that they can sign in and out of the shelter. This system will not do anything with volunteers. That's going to be kept totally separate. So whatever process there is for volunteers will still remain. So back to you.
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Please ask
Sure.
questions.
When you're saying volunteers, like people that, I know we had a former student that came out and said, "Do you all need help? I'd like to help." And I wasn't my school to say, "Yeah, you can help." And I mean, are we looking at people that have done the volunteer application like we do for our students, or are we?
There
just
is a
taking
sign-up
anybody?
form that we haven't, a new sign-up form that we have in our manual that we're going to use, but yes. The difference between a volunteer that doesn't work for the school district and is not paid versus district people that are volunteers that are getting paid, though, we have to make sure that we're
Right, that's why I
separating
was
that out.
wondering.
But there will be a separate sign-up sheet just for volunteers at each school. Okay. So last year we had so many schools open up. We had more schools open up than we've ever opened up as shelters. I think it was 22 schools, at which we've never had anything like that. So we decided we needed to have a tiered activation. Oop, I went the wrong way. And we have 5 tiers. Here's 4 tiers that we're showing here. This is not set in stone, but this is our plan. If you look at the tiers, you can see there's a little bit of logic to it. We are going to open up our high schools and middle schools first. They have the most room. Whenever we open up schools, we never know exactly how many people are going to evacuate. It's a guess. It really is. And unfortunately, things change, and then we end up getting a lot more. And that's what happened this last time. We kept getting more and more and more. But that's something we've never experienced. So if we open up our high schools first, and we did last time, it gives us more room to expand. And you can see as you get down through tier 1 and 2, pretty much all high school, middle schools, tier 3, and then you start hitting tier 4, you're going to start hitting elementaries. Elementary schools, we just don't have as much room. We'd rather not open up elementary schools all over the county and have one building here and one building there. The other thing on here you'll notice is the highlighted schools. If we have a forecast for a large storm surge, these are some schools that are prone to flooding. So there's an asterisk there. If we get a big enough storm, we may not open those up. Then we also have tier 5. Everybody wants to be in tier 5. I don't know why. Yeah. You'll notice we have, we've added Bexley Elementary and Cypress Creek Middle. When we put them at the bottom, since they were so new, we thought we'd be nice to them at first, but that may change. Another thing that we've been working on is a project to do floor plans for all shelters. The Sheriff's Department is helping us with this, and they've taken the lead. So they were going out to schools. Actually, they started that in June, and mapping. So they take a floor plan, and they put down in that floor plan everything where we would put everything in the school. This started in June, like I said, and then when we had our workshops this month, we sat down with each school. So we finished, I think, all tier 1 and 2 schools in June, and then in August we sat down with them for their workshop, and we worked on them some more. So our plan is probably by the beginning of school, we're going to have all the schools mapped out. So each school will have an electronic floor plan showing where they're going to put their stuff. And I have an example in here. These are some of the components that we're using, designating all different areas in the shelter. You might see this one here. That's a toe tag. Anyway, we're asked to identify a morgue area, which may be a little uncomfortable, but it is a possibility at our schools, especially we have special needs, and we did it at ALF facilities. If something like that does happen, law enforcement will take control of that scene because it is a death investigation, and that's something they do on a normal basis. Once they've done that, then they'll call the coroner. The issue would be if we don't, if we have to keep them there because of the weather, we need a place. So that's one of the places that we had to designate. Of course, general population, pet areas, and such. Parking, I mean, it all changes at a school. Some schools have big parking on one area and big parking in another area. And then they have to change that. It fills up. Say, well, now we have to park people over here. So they changed where the registration is. They had to move things around. This is 5A. I'm getting way ahead of myself. So 5A, you get a good idea what they've done. The green stuff is all for general population shelters. And you can see food service there. This is the rest of their buildings there. These are actually two-story buildings too, but anyway, you can see where they're designated. This is also nice. You can see these are for all the backup generator outlets. So certain schools have generators, but they only power certain area.
And John, is that number in red how many occupants can be in that green room?
Yes, it is. And I was going to get to that in a little bit, but what they do is each room we go through, we subtract 20% of the room. So we're going to stack all the chairs to one side, roughly 20%. Then we take the remaining square footage and divide it by 20. So 20 square foot per person, and that's how they come up with that number. So they know already how many people they can put in each room. We've come up with sign-up sheets, so each school is going to take, it's in our manual also, so we'll have a predetermined list of which rooms they're going to use and how many people they can put. So as soon as you sign somebody in, this is the room you're going to, that takes that space, so they go down the list until they can't put any more in there. So they have predetermined.
And just out of curiosity, one of the things we saw is that they would bring in a king-size mattress.
Yes.
Within 20 square feet.
And we need help identifying that, actually putting that word out to the public. The public thinks they can bring whatever they want, and we've talked to the county about putting out this information to the public ahead of time. In fact, it needs to be right at that time, and reinforcing that and telling them, hey, this is what you can expect. If you come to a shelter, it's really not what you might think. I'm not sure exactly how they're going to word it. They're the public information people, but it's not the Love Boat. It's a lifeboat, not the Love Boat. Okay. However you want to put that.
We had the maximum amount, but we also had people who had nothing. Like they
Yeah.
didn't have a mat to lie on.
Exactly, and some of them were elderly, and I understand it's a big concern. And in fact, this time we noticed this is the biggest we've ever had, the biggest activation ever in the history of Pasco County. But way too many people evacuated probably than needed to. If you don't live right on the coast, if you don't live in a mobile home, if you're inland enough and you're not in a mobile home, you're probably better off hunkering down where you're at. But somehow that needs to be communicated because way more people. And I understand people were scared, and we did everything that we could, and then we did a fantastic job. I did not hear anything negative from the public side at all. Nothing. So that says a lot about our people. And thinking on their feet, because you just can't put everything into a manual. I mean, every single thing that came up at a shelter and how it was handled, our shelter managers are making those decisions. and they're doing a good job. This is another big plus. We talked about increasing staffing. Well, the Sheriff's Department essentially is going to double what we have as far as deputies in our schools. So if you had, one deputy per shift, now you're going to have 2 deputies per shift. So it's going to be based on the size of your shelter, but essentially they're going to double that, which is a big thank you to them. We're going to talk a little bit more about EMTs at schools too. So the officer there is going to be the officer in charge, and he'll be the primary point of contact. In most cases, it will be an SRO, so they're already going to be familiar with the school, which is good. And they're going to be in communication with the Emergency Operations Center, whatever law enforcement issues come up, and we know that there will be some. Cafeteria, as mentioned before, food service has always done a great job, and they continue to do a great job. So they kind of manage their own staff, but they're still going to need to communicate with the personnel at the staff, the administrators at the school. They're going to have 2 shifts per day, but they're not going to stay there at night. So unless it's not safe to travel. So in the middle of the night, they really don't have to be there. There's not a whole lot for them to do. So if it's okay to travel, they're going to travel. Some more information they asked to put out. Special meal requests they cannot accommodate, but what we need to do is get the word out, advise everybody if you need something to bring your own. And that needs to go out to the public, and our staff also. If there's some special request or something that you need, you'll have to bring it in. Bottled water, they want to make sure we made a point of not using our bottled water until we have to. So basically, we're trying to conserve our resources, and we don't know how bad it's going to get. So this, they'd like for us to bring our own bottled water too, as much as possible. Shelf-stable kits are only to be utilized at the height of the storm. So again, they're just trying to utilize and conserve our resources. So food service establishes the meal time, and we want to make sure that gets posted for the occupants. That's a big deal. We know that we had so many to feed that we couldn't do it all at once, so we asked the schools to look at how they would do that, and they kind of do it just like they do on regular days. So they're going to do it by building or by rooms, and they're going to bring them in to feed.
Summertime.
Yeah.
I know cafeterias empty out a lot of their stuff.
Yes, they do.
Okay, so
They draw down their food, but in shelter schools, they have a minimum. They're only going to go down so far, and they're going to have a lot of non-perishable stuff. One of the things that they do, I don't know if everybody knows it, they'll also take from other schools. So they're going to have more supplies there than they would at another school in the summer. But they're also going to, if they need to, they're going to go ahead and grab from surrounding schools. They're going to go ahead and grab their food and bring that in. So they're going to pretty much run their show. They're going to determine the number of volunteers and determine the location of meals. This is another big issue. A lot of the cafeterias are not hardened per se. And so they have to figure out, you can use any building in the school before the storm and after the storm. The concern was the height of the storm. Okay, these are the areas that are hardened, this is what we're using. One of the things that we found out, we started looking at all the other buildings, one of the things we found out was, for the most part, there's some rare exceptions, but for the most part, the other buildings are built to the same wind load. So they will withstand the same hurricane force winds. The difference is they did not put generator power into all these other areas. So if we end up, and we ended up putting people in these other areas, and I know there was a lot of concern that we were putting them in unsafe areas, but that really wasn't the case. So in our manual, we've updated our manual. It actually shows the wind load for all the buildings at the school. It'll show the shelter buildings, and then it'll also show the non-shelter buildings, and it shows the wind load for those also. So everybody kind of breathed a sigh of relief. We weren't putting, I know there was a lot of concern, and we did what we had to do, obviously. Transportation, a lot of issues with transportation, but they pretty much support PCPT. So Pasco County Public Transportation is the one in charge usually during an evacuation, and our people back them up. It's more needed to get people out of our shelters though, so our guys are going to try to take more of a lead when it comes time to release people. And that's what we found out. Most people got to shelters because it was an emergency and they had to get there. But once the shelters were closing, we had a lot of people that we couldn't get them out of our schools, to be honest with you. Some of them didn't want to leave. And I understand. They had nowhere to go, some of them, I guess. But our transportation people are going to take more of a positive role, I guess, getting them home. One of the things that we came up with also is they're going to include in the shelter registration form, so they're going to collect information as they register. How did you get here? How are you getting home? So they're going to start pulling this information in, and that's going to be done electronically too. We're going to collect the method of arrival, but we're also going to look at a grid map. So each school is going to have a grid map, and they're going to look at better efficiency. I know we try to get our schools empty, we try to get them cleaned up, try to get them turned back into schools again, and every single time it's always an issue getting that done, but transportation is working on that also. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about maintenance. We've got some items that are to take before the storm, after the storm, during the storm, and stuff about pets.
Good afternoon. I'm Scott Moles from Custodial Services. They asked us to come out and talk to about some stuff like John said before, during, and after the storm. So, before the storm, we want to notify the teachers to lock up desks, filing cabinets, and storage closets. If you don't lock the stuff up, it'll walk away. Have custodial staff stack all furniture on the furthest wall from the exit door. The caveat to that is make sure that they're not blocking egress in or out of in case we have something else happen besides the storm. They need to stack it tight and neat so we can get as many people in as possible, but make sure that it doesn't block egress. Roll up all the area rugs and lock them in storage. We paid a fortune during this last storm to clean area rugs for an outside company. I mean, it cost us a lot of money for folks simply not rolling up rugs and putting them away. So we need to make sure, as administrators, we need to make sure that happens this time. Remove all the electronics and secure in storage areas. Again, if you don't, it's liable to walk away. Put up hurricane shutters or screens if you have them. Some of the schools have, by that, they mean some of the schools have, like Mitchell has hurricane screens that we have to put down. It takes a couple hours to actually get those things down. So as soon as you're notified that you have a storm, if you have those, we need to make sure we have people putting those out immediately. Pre-stock custodial supplies in all the shelter areas. Have hand trucks and flatbeds ready to assist anyone able to carry their belongings. I can tell you I worked the shelter at Mitchell, and we had so many folks that could not carry their own belongings into the shelter. I mean, it was sad, but you know, we had a lot of stuff set up for that. I'm going to tell you the golf carts are a good thing too, because a lot of people will have a whole family and there's a lot of stuff to move. Make sure all custodial equipment's charged and ready for use. By that, I'm talking about like your auto scrubbers. If we lose power during a storm, there's no way to recharge them, but to clean up during and after the storm is a lot easier if they have that equipment ready. It'll stay charged for 4 or 5 hours of use if we have it fully charged before the storm gets here. Set out extra trash cans in the shelter areas. Make sure flashlights have fresh batteries. Fill 5-gallon buckets halfway with sand and place in a designated smoking area. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but I'm going to tell you, if you don't, they will throw them all over your campus. It's much easier to designate that smoking area, put the buckets out there, and they used them when we did it. Pick up and secure any objects that could become a projectile. Create a list of hardened areas to be used for the occupants. Contact people assigned for your shelter and give them their assignments prior to opening. Create a schedule for restrooms from floors to be cleaned and trash to be picked up. I can tell you that if you do it on a schedule, the folks are pretty good about setting their stuff out. Like, you know, we ran through about every hour. So if the cans were full, they would set them right outside the door. It made it a lot faster for the limited amount of custodial staff that they had to actually get the job done. The contact Food and Nutrition Services for meal times to create a cleaning schedule. I can tell you that's important before it ever gets started, because the people will take and use you might have 20 garbage cans in your cafeteria. they're going to use the two closest to wherever the center of the place is. So if you have a time set up, you're not going to have trash all over the place. It was hard the first couple times. Have supplies on hand to prepare the pet areas. By the supplies on hand, they're talking about Visqueen and duct tape. And for Visqueen is just a clear plastic that we're going to put down in the shelter areas. I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. And that stuff is in the warehouse and available to your schools free of charge through the warehouse. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the pets, because it became an issue for the people who didn't want to leave their pets.
Correct. Yeah.
What's our direction? Because I know we don't want to create a big hoopla
As much as
at
possible,
midnight in a storm.
we did what we had to do, and we're gonna continue to do that, so.
If they come without crates, the answer is they have to stay with their pets. You know what I mean? So, but the people with pets and crates, we try to put in an area like we put them in locker rooms. You know, so it's an area that's easy to hose down and wash down and clean after the storm's over. You know, and obviously they're not going to stay, but we gave them access to their pets back and forth the whole time. They could go in and get them out, walk them as much as they wanted to, go in and visit their pets. If you don't have an area where they're actually contained in the classrooms, that's the best suggestion I can give you.
I just know like the people, when we opened at Mitchell, they started saying, oh, it's a service dog.
Yeah, we had a lot of that, and they didn't have paperwork. I get it. Yeah.
And then the dog went and almost bit a kid, like in the first half hour. That was kind of worrisome for us. We just need to know what you all want us to do.
I mean,
Is the SRO to handle it, or?
that's absolutely. I mean, absolutely. If there's an issue with something like that, you definitely want the SRO to handle it. But the easy answer is we should have the designated areas ahead of time. That was kind of a last minute open, so it was like a quick fix.
And are we taking any pets? I mean, we had monitored lizards, we
I'm gonna.
the monitored lizard was really the final straw. I mean, I get puppies and turtle, I mean, aquariums, I mean, we saw.
We had
all
pigs.
kinds of
We had potbelly pigs. We had chickens.
I mean, but a monitored lizard is like, you know, dangerous.
I mean,
Or we could have.
Well-
There you go.
We have asked,
You don't need after this.
our plan is to use animal control at the county. And again, as best we can, we're gonna try to keep them at designated pet shelters. And that is gonna go out to the public, telling the public, these are the areas. And animal control is going to set all those guidelines, so.
Just go
I
pass
have
the
not
buck to
seen
them.
them, but they're the ones that are looking, they're already looking at all the schools and figuring out that information. But we just got overwhelmed last year, and we could very well get overwhelmed again, I understand.
No, we're not gonna have this.
But that is a very good point. Pets is one of the biggest issues, right up there with staffing. And pets,
Absolutely.
there's some very big issues, and we're still working out some
It's a
of those.
family member to many people.
Absolutely, and they're not going to go if you turn them away. If you turn their pets
The
away.
information that, everything that I heard from the public, that was the biggest thing for them, that we did accept those pets. That was a huge service for them. And I realize it cost us a lot of money. We ended up with a huge cleanup bill, okay? And the superintendent made that decision, basically on the fly, but he knew that this is what we needed to do, and we're still working on some of those issues.
We can save a lot of money though if we do it the right way. You know, putting the Visqueen down and like the next slide, have hand trucks, flatbeds, golf carts, and all that stuff. Aside from having it ready to help the people move in, you need to have some of those things available for the folks that bring their animals to move their animals to and from that are in cages. We had folks that had dogs that were 200 pounds. They couldn't carry them. You know, they were in a cage like they were supposed to be, but they couldn't carry them. So if you have that stuff available, they'll move their own stuff.
So the warehouse is going to stock Visqueen and duct tape.
It's already in there.
Palletized, specifically for shelters that open up. They didn't want to put them out at all the schools. They were afraid, keeping track of it might get used. So they're going to have these already pre-packaged, palletized, shrink wrapped, whatever, to bring out to schools as needed.
So you're going to designate an area to house the animals with cages. Again, you want it to be hard surface areas. We don't want to put them on carpet. We don't want to put them on area rugs. And you want to prepare those areas, if you can, the same way with Visqueen and duct tape, so that the cleanup is a lot easier at the end and costs us a lot less. Do you need to designate areas for the people that bring their pets that don't have cages, like you're talking about? You know, but they have to stay with the pet the whole time. We had people that came that didn't even have a leash with their animal. You know, so they have to stay with the pet the whole time. The prepare rooms that will house the pets by covering the entire floor 4 feet up the wall. So what you want to do is take the visqueen, put it 4 feet up the walls, tape it to the walls, tape the seams so it's not running through onto our floors. At the end, you can fold it all in on itself and throw it all away once we've got everybody out. It makes it a whole lot easier. And designate a pet walk area. And I'm going to tell you that when we designated the pet walk area over there, if there was stuff out there for them to clean up with, like a garbage can for them to throw their bags and stuff in, they did. If there wasn't, the very first day we weren't prepared, and so they left their dog feces and stuff on the ground, and there was a lot of cleanup, sidewalks, all that type of stuff. So along with preparing it, I would say put out stuff for them to clean up with, garbage cans and bags if we have it.
Do we have pet bags? Is that something?
We don't have pet bags, but I'm gonna tell you right now, we gave them the small garbage bags.
That would be good. I think adding those to the pallets
Yeah.
would be a great idea.
We gave them the small garbage bags, and it helped.
Whatever's most cost effective, Scott?
Yeah.
And do we have like a rope or any kind of tape that you're gonna use to designate those areas?
We just marked it with signage. You know, I mean, tried to mark it with signage out in the back of the campus over there. And the bad part is the long walks to and from through
Yes,
the building.
Absolutely.
So you're going to hear me talk some about that in a little while, about making sure we have the stuff prepared to clean up for the folks that these animals don't make it outside. They're excited. They're in a strange place. All that good stuff. If the winds are 120 miles an hour or predicted to be 120 miles an hour or more, we need to make sure all of our shady structures are taken down. That's a job, but they become a big kite if we don't do it. Have trash cans ready to dispose of the pet waste. Again, you just heard me say that. Post signage that says owners are responsible to clean up after their pets. Most of them were really good about it. We had people the first day, that's how we realized we had a problem and we hadn't done that. They asked if we had something for them to clean up with. Have a custodial cart with supplies ready in the pet area. Again, that's, you know, if you have paper towels, you have some germicide on the carts and some garbage bags. If the pets go inside the building, the owners would clean it up themselves and did. All pets need to be registered at the time of arrival. They should be kept on a leash when they're not in their crates. Check pet areas regularly for cleanups, and by that I mean the hallways and stuff, because you're going to have to put out wet floor signs because they're going to piddle in the hallways. We're going to have slip and falls if we don't, that type of stuff. So we need to have mops and buckets posted in those hallways for people to clean up their own stuff. Make sure supplies are restocked and trash is removed from all the pet areas. The green fiber dumpsters, everybody knows what your green fiber dumpsters are for our cardboard and all that. That is your overflow out of shelter. If we have trash and our regular dumpsters are full, we're going to throw it into the green fiber dumpsters. We're going to get those empty and cleaned at the end of the storm, but we're going to use that area. Now, the other thing is, and it's identify a place-to-place overflow trash if needed. We want to make sure we spent a lot of time and manpower and had to get a lot of extra people cleaning up trash because it got thrown outside, like just in the grass and stuff. So it needs to at least be on a concrete or asphalt type of surface. The best area that we've come up with is most of the dumpsters at the schools have the 3 walls around them. Throw it behind the dumpsters in that 3-wall area. We can get the dumpster company move the dumpsters out. We can take a loader and load the stuff without having to have all the manpower to get it out of the schools at the end. When it's safe to travel, someone from the school needs to report to maintenance if the power is on. That doesn't mean, please, this was the worst thing we had. If you go and you walk into your front office and you turn the lights on and they come on, that doesn't mean the power is on everywhere in your campus. Somebody needs to walk the entire campus and make sure that all the buildings have power, because if not, we need to get the power company or our maintenance department out there working on it right away. And the only way we know is if you guys call in. Check the school for damage and report to maintenance as soon as possible. Again, you're walking through, you're checking for roof leaks, you're checking for downed trees, stuff that would stop us from reopening, wet floors, and you're going to call and report that immediately. You're going to report all damage immediately, but the stuff that's going to stop us from getting school back on, that needs to happen right now. Check the generator fuel level and report to maintenance. That is, you'll need to check the generator fuel, but the gas caps on those things are notorious for sticking. So almost every plant manager has a dipstick to check the fuel level manually also. They need to do it both ways and make sure that we have a sufficient amount of fuel. The generator's not going to run out, because if it runs out, it costs us a lot of money to get it back up and going. report to shelter assignments for cleanup. So whatever school your school is assigned to help clean up afterwards, that's where they'll go right after the storm. And that's it for us. Only because John got in the middle of it.
Yeah. I don't know about that. Okay. Hi. My name's Lisa Kern. I'm the supervisor for School Health Services, and I'm going to talk to you about good stuff that you'll all be really happy about. And the first thing on here is that in all gen population shelters, we're going to have at least 2 to 4 EMTs there for you for the duration. So you should all be happy, right? You won't have to deal with, like, gosh, what was it, like a toe falling off at one location. So hopefully the EMTs will take care of that if we have that, which I'm hoping that we don't. But the part about reaching out to local partners. So I think that's a great idea for the folks that you know real well. So if you know one of your parents happens to be a doctor or somebody else happens to be a nurse, and they have some medical training and they're actually going to go out to a shelter if we have a storm, that's a great idea to develop a partnership with them. I would be really wary of someone that comes to the shelter that identifies themselves as a healthcare provider that you don't know from a hole in the wall, so to speak. And I would not have engaged that person in providing assistance from a medical standpoint. You'll have plenty of assistance from ENTs. There will be some school nurses out at schools as well, clinic assistants, LPNs, whoever wants to do that. I think HR has like a very long list, I'm hoping. In any case, EMTs will take care of all of the medical needs at schools. And we're all talking about the issue that happened with ALFs and people with very significant needs. And I believe we have some plans in place to offset that.
Going
Yes.
on with the legislature and reinforcing their requirements. All ALFs are required to have a plan in place.
Want to chat? Go for it. That's important.
All
because people have
ALFs
been
are required to have a plan in place, okay? And they're supposed to have generators now. This is all being reinforced, and we're not supposed to get ALFs at our school shelters. Unfortunately, we had a lot, and we did what we had to, and it was mostly was at Wesley Chapel High School, but I know that there were some exceptions to that. They didn't all land there. The reason we use Wesley Chapel High School is because it has backup power for the entire school. There's 2 schools, Wiregrass Ranch High and Wesley Chapel High, both have total backup power for the entire campus, and they have enough fuel to run probably for more than a week, maybe 2. So that's why we use that. But we should not be getting those. And if we do get ALFs showing up at schools, regular school shelters, general population, we need to refer them to the Emergency Operations Center. Okay, if there's no way to send them somewhere else, we have to take them. I understand. We do what we have to do. But they should not be going there, and if they do, the school should be notifying the EOC and making plans to go somewhere else.
One of the biggest issues at Wesley Chapel was that the ALFs that showed up did not have the staff to
Right.
support them.
And that goes along with that. That's exactly what, if they do relocate, they're supposed to bring their staff. That's all part of that. So what I'm saying is essentially they're clamping down on that. Okay, so that happened everywhere. Obviously, Pasco County got it, but so did the rest of the state.
everywhere.
Yeah. And so we did a super job, obviously, but that's not the way it's supposed to work.
So Lisa, my situation that I saw was a little bit different in that an ALF didn't come with people, but there were people who were very needy who came with private care providers.
Right.
In full hospital beds, in full wheelchairs, who needed catheterizations, who needed those kinds of facilities. And their staff obviously was working 24/7 at that point to maintain, and they weren't getting any relief. So when we have not ALFs, not organizations, but those private people needs people.
So the criteria for special needs is kind of pretty narrow. And in some cases, folks like that may not qualify for special needs shelters, which is why that person was probably directed there. The private duty nurses would be just like family caregivers in that they would be the ones that are providing care for that person 24. Right. No, they're probably CNAs or medical assistants. But they're the folks through probably an agency, I would assume, a private duty agency. They're responsible for the care and management of that particular patient. In a storm situation, you're probably not going to get relief or assistance. If there's somebody else there that can provide help, I'm sure that they would appreciate it. But that would be, I mean, when you're in that kind of a situation, it's, you know, all bets are off and you do the best that you can given the
We
situation.
were like bringing them food to where
Yep.
they were because obviously they
Couldn't come to you,
transport,
right.
Those kinds of things. But even, I mean,
Yes.
one of the elderly people had to stay in the wheelchair, didn't have a bed because they, you know, we didn't have this at our shelter.
Right. So when you can direct, before the storm starts to prevent you from moving people, if there's room at the special needs shelters, my suggestion would be to get in touch and to see whether or not that they could accept that particular type of patient. Yep. Most special needs register, correct? Ahead of
supposed to,
time,
but-
they're
yeah.
supposed to, so that they would have a space at a special need facility. But a lot of times that doesn't happen, especially with folks that are the older clientele.
Which school was
And then, you good? The last thing, your EMT folks should be bringing everything that they need to care for folks. They will be, they should have access to your AEDs. So if you have more than one, I would say at least 2 in the vicinity of where they are. If they also have access to where the school clinic is and may need some replenishment of supplies, I would say please open up those doors and give them access if they need any additional medical supplies that they might not have on hand. Until the storm hits, I think that they will be able to have folks come out to them to replenish their supplies. They may also have some system in place to be able to change out their personnel, but I believe that what's supposed to happen is that at all times you'll have at least 2 to 4, depending upon the size of your facility at your location for the duration. Okay? Yep, question.
In addition to regular medical things that we all think of, is that we needed a big supply of feminine hygiene products. That became a huge issue at our
Interesting. Yes, because people do not think ahead to bring that with them.
feminine hygiene.
High schools usually have a pretty good supply. Were you at an elementary school or a?
That was like common.
Yeah, nobody has a period at Conneton, sorry. Oh, I said that on the record. Sorry. You know, small kids, when you're at high schools, there's all types of menstrual products that are typically available, yes.
Do you want to
Sorry.
keep an inventory if they do need to use the resources in the school clinic? Or you want to just keep an inventory of what's going out?
No, I think that if they're in need of I would trust those guys to be able to access whatever it is that they need. They can't do surgery or anything like that, you know, like, so that there was some discussion about where their intervention begins and ends. You know, they can start use of the AED, and if it's one of those things where there's no vehicle to be able to respond in terms of additional help, they'll have to do the best they can to manage that. But yeah.
Lisa, any concerns about medication, controlling controlled substances, securing those on campuses? Any concerns about diabetic insulin, coolers, any of those things? Any guidance?
So folks are supposed to be coming to shelters prepared. And in some cases, if you have ice packs, then you can provide assistance to them in terms of keeping things cool. That would be great. I don't know, from a controlled substance standpoint, like probably all of you have stories about different things that were present. in your shelters. There were some people there that were supposed to be taking medicine that didn't really have the capability to take medication safely, it seemed like. And I think that folks are supposed to be responsible for their own possessions, but that doesn't keep others from accessing anything from a person that's unable to manage their own. I think us as shelter workers should be looking out for that and providing assistance and support to those people that are somewhat impaired cognitively, yes, on so many different levels. Okay, these are your special needs shelters. That's Wiregrass, Fasano, and I believe Wesley Chapel High School. Yes, for sure? Okay.
Wesley Chapel is more of a backup special needs.
Yep. So the emergency operations folks are going to be directing special needs clients to those designated areas. And again, that is as far as time and circumstances allow. At those locations, they'll have access to oxygen for patients. They'll be able to provide medical assistance. There'll be RNs there that can help them, lifting equipment, all of those things that we did not have at our locations, and we probably could have used a Hoyer lift or two. Okay, any other questions for me?
I just have a question.
Sure.
Where is Fasano?
Fasano is in the Hudson area, off of,
That is a county shelter, it's not school board.
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's not a,
In fact, if any shelter opens, Fasano
Health
opens,
department.
that is the very first shelter. If we can get away with just opening one shelter, that's great, we'll open up their shelter. But it is always the first, and it is a special needs shelter.
Is there any plans though, because that's, for example, Sana was full and we got overflow from there and we're unable to respond quickly.
If Fasano was full, what?
It was.
Right, and so Wiregrass Ranch High School was next.
They weren't taking them, they were taking them to the closest shelter they could find.
They weren't taking any more.
We got whole groups of.
And the next in
people,
line is
special
supposed to be
needs.
Wesley Chapel High School is the only other school that can be used as special needs. The issue I think with that is staffing too, and we had a lot of ALFs there. The county can't give us what they don't have. I mean, they only have so much staff. I don't know that from what I can tell, they don't have the staff to open up 3 special needs shelters.
the reality is they have so many beds.
Yeah.
Once those beds are full, they're going to be redirecting people to Gen Pop shelters. And that's
So
why
it
we
is.
have it's good that we have EMTs there, because they'll be able to provide some level of assistance. The level of care that they'll need at a special needs shelter is a little bit higher than what you can provide to them at Gen Pop, but in circumstances like that, you